It's all yours.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this Chill with Jim episode where it's always business up top and, of course, the pajamas on the bottom. I am your host, Jim McCarthy, and I am the client advocate for Strix, Louisiana. My job is to make sure that our clients are set up with the best equipment, best software, and the best IT solutions that are out there. We also have David DeArmond, the owner of Strix Louisiana, with us.
Hey, I am David DeOrman, owner of Strix, Louisiana, and as the owner, it is my job to own technical problems. That's it.
You sure about that?
That's it.
You sounded very adamant. Okay, well, the owner of the tech problems. So I hope that means that you're not generating those tech problems as
No,
well.
I don't create them. I just own them. I own them and destroy them.
There you go. That's what I like. That's what I like. All right. Well, just a little bit about Strix, everyone. We believe there's always a better, simpler way, a more secure way of doing just about everything we do. So what that means is we're constantly searching and adapting our processes to make sure that we have the best solutions in place. Some of this responsibility we believe is to help educate our clients as well as others on how to best use the resources that are out there to bring awareness to security risks that are happening right now, and just to talk about the general trends in the IT world today. And so that's really why we designed Chill with Jim. You know, it's to help be a solution provider to all of those out there. And today, what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be taking a look at insider threats. You know, we're going to look at what an insider threat is. We're going to go over some statistics. We're going to talk about how do you recognize a potential insider threat before it gets out of hand. And then we're going to discuss ways to prevent and lessen the chance that there's going to be a successful insider threat attack. So first up, you know, what exactly is an insider threat? Well, there's a few different definitions we could go through, but basically this is a user who has legitimate access to a company's assets, who uses this access, whether it's maliciously and intentionally or unintentionally, to cause harm to the business. Insider threats, they don't necessarily have to be a current employee. They can also be a former employee. They can be a contractor. They can also be a partner in your company. So whether it's a partner business or, you know, someone on the board, there's someone with access to your organization's systems and data that can, you know, like I said, unintentionally or intentionally use that data to harm the organization, the business, or some of its resources. You know, we're going to go over some of those stats. So there was a recent report that was done by an email security firm named Tessian, and they surveyed just 2,000 people, and they asked them if they've ever taken company documents with them before they left a job. And surprisingly, a third of those people admitted, yep, I've done it. Yep, that's me. I've definitely done it. So, and that was a report that was done this year. It also revealed that about 80% of employees that are planning to leave an organization, they're going to take some data with them, some way, some form. They're going to take that data home with them.
So 80% say that, or 80% say that it has happened, and 1/3 say that they did it.
80% of them, well, so 1/3 of them admit to it.
Right.
The study is finding that 80% of them actually do this. So, I mean, I think it kind of aligns with basic human nature, what we see kind of with people, how much they're willing to admit and how much the numbers actually show. But this 80%, you're gonna, you know, they were looking at the time frame, and you know, it's usually about 2 weeks to 2 months prior to someone leaving. is when they start to see data being transferred, being manipulated. So it's in their heads, you know, they might not have the job yet that they're looking for, but they're starting to take little bits and pieces here and there. Most of these reports are going to show you that 25% of insider threats are actually hostile in intent. They're meaning to do harm. There's another 75% of these attacks that are just by accident, by careless use, by an unknowing user who's doing, you know, not being smart with their data access, that brings harm to the company. 62% of these employees reported that they had access, 62% of employees in general have reported that they have access to things that they don't even need access to, that they're going to have access to company data that has nothing to do with their job, and they really don't know why they have that access. And then some of the big targets lately have been financial service companies and healthcare organizations. Their rate of an attack from an insider threat is much higher. I know that, you know, and we've referenced it in past Chill with Gyms. The information that's out there for those two type of those industries is valued at a lot higher price on the dark web. So if you can give credentials for a financial institute or a healthcare institute, you'll get paid a lot more than you would if it's, you know, just a retail store or something like that. So I think that's why they're seeing the heightened attack vector there. Just last week in the news, former Uber executive who oversaw the self-driving vehicles, his name was Anthony Lewandowski. Well, he pleaded guilty to stealing information. He was actually sentenced to 18 months in prison, and he was fined $95,000 and has to pay restitution to Google's self-driving car company that was under Uber's employ, 7,500 or 7,050, no, 7,075, okay, $7,050 in restitution. And I don't know why I had such a hard time with that number. It's a big number. We'll just put it at that. But that was all due to him taking an internal tracking document that was related to the self-driving program, and that hit the news. I think it was on Tuesday where he was the one, he admitted guilt and was sentenced that day. So how do I see, you know, we know the stats now. How do I know if there is a potential for an insider threat, insider attack going to happen? There's a couple major signs you can look for as a company. You know, the first thing is you're going to want to review the browsing history of people that are on staff. Now, typically an employee who is spending a lot of their time on job search websites is going to be a likely candidate for what they call a flight risk. So that's someone who's planning on probably leaving your company. Now, they might be emailing a resume out to external parties. And this kind of behavior it's not a guarantee, but it's a good indicator that you need to start watching this person, start looking at how much access to the data they actually have to make sure you can mitigate anything that happens when they do decide to leave. There's another sign. The second sign is, you know, you'll start to see people who are going to move important information out of the company into maybe their email. Maybe they're going to put it to their OneDrive. They're going to start using the collaboration tools to start moving this data around in ways that's suspicious. They might be uploading this information to a USB. And you know, the more suspicious the behavior, the more you have to really look into what this employee is doing. A lot of times they're going to send emails to one party with a lot of information, a lot of data. You're not going to see a whole lot of big party emails, so they're not going to blast it out to like 5 or 10 people. It's going to be those little instances of them sending information to one party with a lot of data, where you're going to have to really dive in deep to see what's going on here. And some of the prevention that you can put into place as a company, we'll go over a lot of those areas where you can help protect your company. You know, first and foremost, the most logical way to prevent an insider attack is to limit access to data for every employee. Most companies are going to use what's known as the principle of least privilege. Now, this method ensures that employees will only have information privileges to the resources that they absolutely need to perform their job function. Now, the statistic before says 60% of employees are saying, well, I got all kinds of access that I don't really even need. This is where it's really important to evaluate, you know, job descriptions, job functions, to make sure that these employees don't have more than what they're going to use.
Yeah, that's a big one. I hear you talk about that, and you said you know, most companies are going to do the philosophy of least privilege. That may be how most companies go after inside or protecting from insider threats and protecting the data. But I would, in my experience, Harley, Brad, I'd be interested to see what you guys have seen. Most companies, especially small companies, they have very little. It is everybody has access to everything because that's the easiest thing to set up.
Agreed, man. I think I'm in agreement with that being probably like the number one most important way to mitigate this type of threat. And another thing that I don't think we've really talked about, at least not yet, is, you know, the insider threat that might not just be intent on taking data with them and leaving, but to actually perform malicious activity within the company. And, you know, maybe that's installing malware or trying to spread from, you know, control from their computer to another employee's computer, or potentially taking over a file server and, you know, getting real full compromise of the company. And I think the principle of least privilege is the number one easiest way to try to help mitigate and put some roadblocks in front of them. But on that topic, David, of not really seeing companies that, you know, have that implemented properly, I was literally just this week, I came across some sensitive payroll accounting information that was on a file share that was just public. Anybody on the network, you didn't have to be a domain user. You could just connect a laptop and you'd be able to browse to that share and get payroll information that contains social security numbers and, you know, salary amounts and that type of thing. So, and when I talked to the end user about it, he's like, oh, I had no idea that I was even doing that. You know, the guy who created those documents.
Right.
And so, yeah, no, we see it all the time.
Yeah, I agree with you. We've seen a lot of that in our industry, where it's like passwords to very sensitive information are just on a shared folder with everybody in the entire company. The other thing, you know, kind of along the lines that you're talking about, Harley, with destructive behavior. So we're working with a prospect that they let someone go a few years ago. And so what this person did is they grabbed a external hard drive, took all of their information with them, and then tried to open up their own business doing the same exact thing. That happens quite a bit. Or there's just the employee that says, I'm so fed up with this place, I am going to delete everything on their server, and just demolishes any data they have. They just want to destroy it. Very, very common things that happen in the industry, unfortunately, with especially disgruntled employees. You know, another way you can help prevent or lessen the chance of a insider threat is to work on your processes and your procedures to help really secure the data. You know, you want to make sure there's a clear process to onboarding an employee and to offboarding an employee. When you're onboarding, you want to do thorough background checks. You want to include very detailed information regarding the company's data and the security they need to take in their contract, and review the contract with them so they know what they're getting into. You really want to set the bar high when you first get them, to let them know that, hey, this is something we're aware of. This is something we're watching, because it gives a little bit more security where that person's not going to think, well, oh, I can just pull one over on this company. So very, very important on the onboarding side. And then the one we're probably most afraid of is the offboarding. When you're offboarding an employee, you really want to make sure that you have a policy, a procedure in place to obtain well, first of all, you want to cancel all of their access to all of the company data pretty much right away. But you're going to want to have something in place that says, how are you going to revoke these permissions? How are you going to get the equipment they're using back? Maybe they have a company cell phone. Maybe they have a company laptop. What are the ways that your organization, what are some of the ways that they can ensure that these pieces of company, the company devices aren't going to walk away with the employee when they walk away?
Yeah, that's a big one, Jim, that you mentioned, because we very often handle the user accounts for our clients, and what we find is we get the call after the fact. And what we try to tell our clients is, we need to know if you're going to lay somebody off or fire them or whatever, if you're going to terminate an employee, let us know beforehand, because we need to cut that access before you take those measures, whenever possible. Because if it's after, well, there's a window there, and if they're upset about being let go or terminated, you've opened up a window that you don't want to open up as a business owner or a business leader.
Yeah, it's a great point. That's the first step you want to take. That's why I think it's mentioned throughout a lot of the articles you're going to read, or the information out there, is you want your HR department, your administrative department, and your IT department working closely together every time you have to hire or let someone go. A lot of times HR admin will forget about the IT guys, and we find out afterwards. It opens up the door for mistakes. It opens up the door for security breaches. And on the onboarding side, it usually just makes it a little more difficult when we could have been onboarding this person for the last week, and now we have to do it in a day. So one of the things to take into account here is, now we're all at home. Most of us are working from the house. So even if you had a procedure and policy in place in the past, it probably wasn't updated when we got the phase 1, you have to work from home. And so this opens up a lot more avenues of how do you control the devices? How do you revoke privileges? And that's really, I think, a step that needs to be taken for a lot of companies right now, since we're still working from home, might be for a little bit. But things like, how am I going to get these laptops back? How am I going to get door badges back, mobile phones, any data that's handled on maybe a USB external hard drive? What are the procedures your business is going to take to make sure that this is returned? With us all being working from home, it's really important to get these things handled. Another way to help prevent this is through security training to all your employees. You're going to want to go over basic data security practices. You're going to want to go over, how they share, how they interact with the data. A lot of IT companies now are providing, data security training as part of their offering. I highly recommend signing up for this. Over and over and over through all of these Chill with Gyms, you're going to hear a theme, and that is the #1 reason that things go bad is because of a user. The user does something wrong. They interact some way that creates a dangerous situation. And so the best way to handle this is through knowledge, through education. And so that's another thing you can do as a company. Pay attention to your employees' well-being. I like this suggestion here. You want to always be aware of how your employees are feeling. What's the morale of the office? What are, how are people feeling? This article when I was researching this talks about mandating vacations. So I think David mandated one for next week for me. It's going to be paid for 2 years, so I better get on that real quick. I'll still tune in for the Chill with Jims, but but yeah, you can also look at helping your employees manage their anxiety through, they offer, counseling, coaching sessions. You really want to get involved with your employees to make sure that they're feeling appreciated while they're at work. One of the ways that you offboard a person or onboard a new employee can create some issues with morale. And if you kick this person out the door and just handle it in a rough way, the other employees are going to see it. It might make them uncomfortable. So you want to keep that in mind as well.
You mind if I pop in and ask a question here?
Go ahead.
So I think what you're talking about is super important. But I also think with some of the mitigation strategies we talked about, with limiting people's access to data or monitoring their browser activity, or just trying to keep an eye on and keep a grasp on what's going on with the company. How do you balance, right? How do you balance the culture aspect of, hey, I've got freedom and my employer is great and I don't feel like I'm being micromanaged, with that security of making sure that your data is safe?
Yeah, Harley, I love that question because I have seen, before I started Strix, I worked at a company. I was the IT director, and I had a much different philosophy than what I kind of learned in running Strix. And it was much more just, we're going to lock you down. Like, you are a user, you have this little box to work in, and we're going to be watching. And if you're outside that box, we're coming after you. And that was more the mentality. And Jim mentioned morale. That just ticked people off. Like they didn't feel like a trusted member of the team, because there were so many things built around watching what you're doing. On the other hand, if you don't take those measures, then, like Jim mentioned, they make a mistake, or you have that person that wants to go start their own business and they take all your information. So what I've kind of developed and would love to get your input on it, and what you think is that education piece. We look at cybersecurity education as, well, you teach people about ransomware, you teach them about what to look for in a phishing email, that sort of thing. It's not just that. It's also teaching your employees to understand why you have certain protections in place, why it's not easy for them to just go anywhere on your file server and grab the file they need, because employees get aggravated. I just need this file. I'm trying to do my job. I just need the file. If you educate them and say, I understand, we put this in place to protect the company, to protect your job, to protect you as an employee, then they at least have a little bit better sense, and you can keep that morale up while still protecting your data.
Yeah, that answer you gave was exactly the answer that I give to is that user awareness training that we touched on, that Jim touched on. But I think it's really powerful for someone to go from saying, like, I just want local admin rights on my computer because I want to be able to install Spotify, or I want to be able to install iTunes. And it's like, okay, I hear what you're saying. And I think that's, I think having that power is good. But at the same time, let me teach you about why that's risky, and let me show you, let me demonstrate it for you. And
Yeah.
I think once they understand it, and it shifts. It goes from being oh, this person is just trying to control me to wow, this person's actually trying to protect me. And and I mean, when we're talking about insider threats, that might be a little bit different, but just in general, as far as like keeping that culture alive, yeah, I think the training is huge. I think demonstrating through actual like internal network assessments, you don't really know what all's out there until it's brought up, right? So if you can do an assessment internally and see, hey, look, because everybody had local admin rights, I was able to pivot, from one computer that got compromised to the entire network potentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if it becomes like at that point where it's like, I don't want that liability as a user.
Right.
I don't want to have local admin rights, because that could mean I could be the reason our company goes under, So that's my 2 cents on it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I'll just chime in a little bit. I think it goes back to the whole tail wagging the dogs scenario. That's what it's seen as. And where really what it needs to be is it's a culture of security where the C-level is buying into this whole concept that
Yes.
every decision we make, we need to have a frame of security around it. And that means that IT needs to be more involved, where your security team needs to be more involved in those decisions instead of trying to come in after the fact.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that's part of that onboarding process is so important to lay those expectations out there and to let them know that, hey, we do run a tight ship around here. We are going to be monitoring these things. We do have these things in place. Because if you create that expectation from the start, I think people are a lot less off put, when they're in there, they've been there a month or two, and it's like, I don't understand why are they watching all this stuff, or why can't I access the things I need? Harley, I love your admin privileges point, because I was going to bring that up, but we have a client who, I mean, it's like every 2 or 3 weeks they have a program they need for work that updates, and we have to log in and put in our admin credentials and update it for them. And just it's been not necessarily a battle, but they just, for the longest time, were like, well, why can't you just let me do this? Why can't you just let me do this? And through the training, through practical experience, we can show that user that this is when things go wrong. We can't just allow you to do it. One of the things we did do for another client was similar, asking for similar things, was we took someone into administration and we set them up as an admin user that can then allow for updates or downloads of certain programs. They were, vetted in by the CEO or the owner of the company, said, hey, we're going to give this person privileges to update the software if we need to. But we always make sure that person is comfortable and technically sound enough to make that call. Just because they're a manager doesn't mean you want to give them access. But that is one of the ways we saw to help our clients, stay productive, so they're not necessarily waiting for that privilege.
Yeah, and that's a good one, because it kind of forces the employee to go to usually a manager within the business and explain why they need Spotify, or why this game that just came out and they're downloading and installing. When they call us and they're trying to sneak around, and that puts us in an uncomfortable position. When we can say, hey, go to your manager, they have the ability to install, a lot of that stuff disappears, strangely enough.
Great point. Yeah, and just wanted to throw it out there. I know Harley chimed in, but like all of these Chill with Jim discussions, totally open discussion. So at any point in the episode, feel free to ask questions, to make a comment, chime in and say, Jim, why are you in New York and why is it nighttime right now? well, this is the Strix studio, and for some reason it's always nighttime in New York here, and I don't know. But yeah, please feel free to chime in at any time, because we really want this to be a back and forth with all the people involved. David's monitoring Facebook Live so we can get all their questions, and we just really like this to be a good back and forth.
One thing I could share with when you were talking about offboarding and why that's so important. One thing that a lot of people don't really even think about is if a user leaves a company and maybe that company doesn't let IT know for us to lock out accounts that we have control of, or maybe they assume that we have control of all of the accounts and we take care of things that we don't, right? Then that could leave some other accounts, maybe like a bank account that's tied to the company bank information, right? If it's an accounting user, it could leave that open. And one thing I've seen is if those user accounts stay open, even if you don't have, the person who's leaving the company as the bad guy who's going to do something bad with that, data breaches happen all the time. And I'm not saying the bank necessarily is going to be breached, but what if that user account, what if the person who owned that account and created the password use that password in other places, right? Maybe they use that on a game website for personal, in their personal life, but it's the same credential. And then, that gets breached. And now we've got this big public data breach that's on our hands for a user we would have never even thought about, for valid credentials that are tied to our company when, this is a user who hasn't been there for a year. So
Yep.
It's those type of things too that we always have to be aware of, because attackers are taking those breach credentials and they're credential stuffing and trying to see if it gets you access anywhere.
Yeah, yep. And so everybody out there in Facebook world and all that, the credential stuffing is a very common technique where, let's say they get your Facebook is breached and they get your Facebook password. Well, they're going to go ahead and try that password through thousands of different services to see if you used it in some other way. And that's a very common way for them to get access to other things. Where a lot of us humans like to use things that we can remember. Things that we can remember are usually the same password or just slight variations of that. I got to put an explanation at the end or something. We have a great show with Jim about password managers and password protection, so check it out on our YouTube. One of the things we didn't talk about was how, through an IT resource, you can really monitor and track a lot of this to kind of to see what's going on and prevent it from getting out of hand. Some of the things that we can do is we can do some auditing. We use auditing technology to detect like unusual outbound traffic. Another thing you want to do as a company is you want to keep a well-maintained inventory of devices and software usage for each employee. That way, when it's time to maybe change their position or they do leave, you have a list of everything that they've been using. It makes it a lot easier to go back and take what's needed, take the access away or get those devices back if you have that active ongoing list. Just helps you refer back so you don't have to remember everything. You're going to want to, backup and recovery is huge. So that guy, that girl who gets really mad, fires right now, or just quits right now, and I'm done with this place, delete everything. Well, that's all right. For Strix and clients, we have all of their information is backed up on site and off site every 30 minutes. So that's not a problem. We just go back in time and get everything that we lost, everything that you deleted. That's a big one. That's a big one that'll just help prevent anything. It also gives you the foothold. So if you do go into a litigation, a legal, legal interaction with someone, another company, you can show the past, how long you've had that data for, which will help you if someone takes your data and tries to open up a company. You can show, hey, we had these files on our server for 7 years or whatever. So that backup is very important. You're going to want to also, let's see, some of the other things that we can do is test for vulnerabilities in your network, vulnerabilities in your data sharing. You can have IT experts come in and run some tests to see where the security holes are in your network. Where is there where's there an employee that has too much access to too much data? That's something that IT experts can look at, or your IT company can look at as well.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said, that's kind of how I found, that accounting information is I just took a look around the network to see what an unauthenticated user could see and came across that.
Yep, and also if you're a Microsoft 365 subscriber, one thing I would encourage you to do is look at the data loss prevention, the DLP they call it, the data loss prevention policies that are available there, or talk to an IT provider about DLP on Microsoft 365 products. That's going to help. You can create policies. The Office 365 suite is pretty slick. It will watch the information that you're sending back and forth. It watches if you use Outlook on your phone, OneDrive, those sorts of things. It's going to watch that data going back and forth, and it will actually flag things and block actions if it sees that there's, this data is kind of sensitive. I don't think this behavior doesn't look normal. It will block it. It's paying attention to what's going on. So I encourage everyone to look into DLP, data loss prevention.
That's a great way of doing it. And the auditing features within Microsoft 365 are great as well. So, again, if this is your business, for all those business owners out there, it's not going to necessarily be your forte. So you should really consider bringing in an IT security expert, maybe like Strix, Louisiana, to come and help you out. Because really, you want to make sure all your bases are covered. This type of behavior can cost, I think the average for a larger company is $100,000 to $500,000 in just mitigation efforts. But the potential for, if they wipe out all of your systems, it's going to be really, really hard for you to operate as a business. And we see with a lot of data breaches, if they lose, or ransomware attacks, that if this happens within 6 months, that business is no longer in operation.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize it, but the Target breach that got so much publicity because it was such an expensive breach, that's actually an insider threat. It was a third-party contractor that was working for Target, had a legitimate reason for access to their systems. Well, maybe legitimate, but it was more than they really needed. And Target didn't take the necessary steps to give that contractor, it was an HVAC contractor, the air conditioning system, and they were trying to give that contractor access to do what they needed to do, but they opened up the door way too big, and so that's considered an insider threat. And the contractor, they weren't trying to do it. Like Harley mentioned before, it was somebody that breached the contractor systems and then waited for that contractor to be inside of Target's network, and then they went for the attack and made off of millions of dollars. So
yeah, this is a great point too, because you've got to also think about, obviously, yourselves and your own company, but you got to think about the people you work with, and like the HVAC system. If an attacker had compromised them, obviously they could pivot over to Target. What if you had an insider threat who wasn't really, educated on how to spot a phishing email and knew what to not click on, and
right.
now their email is compromised, it's not just your guys' company that you have to think about in that case. Like, it's all of those contacts for your employees' contacts. Because now the attacker has that list, and they're going to try to target maybe the companies that trust your brand, right? So it's that insider threat, which is the person, but it's still an outside party, right, who can potentially try to harm your brand and hurt your clients and customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something that I've seen common with a lot of companies is so if they have their accounting is outsourced, right? They're gonna have the accountant with the remote capabilities to come into their computer, come into all their systems, and help them with their books. You know, totally legitimate reason for letting someone into your IT infrastructure, and you know, a lot of businesses, they don't want to do internal accounting, so they hire out. But this opens up a big door. One of the things I saw recently was, you know, what remote software is this company using to get into your computer? And if it's one of those free off the internet downloads, the security there for that remote software is very, very limited. And I just couldn't, I had a hard time believing that they would use this off-brand remote capable software to come and work on financial information, to have access to all of the employees, you know, social security accounts, bank accounts, just basically all of their information. And it's just because that accounting person probably doesn't have an IT department that helps them make those decisions. So they're not trying to be malicious. They're just operating within their means. But, you know, that's something I've seen a lot with accounting firms remoting in and having unlimited access, really.
And when you're vetting these different vendors to work with, you can typically get a pretty good idea, you know, where their security posture is, right? Based on the questions that you ask them, or hopefully they ask you about, you know, well, hey, how do I secure my access to your company? Do you guys have a MFA policy in place, right? Like, if they ask you those questions, then they're likely a vendor that you want to consider working with. But if they're not asking you those questions, if you're asking them and they don't have solid answers, you may, you know, want to mark them down on your list of vetting vendors, right? Like, you might want to give somebody else priority over them, even if that other vendor seems like they're not as good of a fit, because you can't necessarily assume all that risk that they bring.
Yeah, and actually flipping that around as well, or is your company prepared to answer those questions? Because if you're trying to contract, especially with a larger company or one that's regulated, are you able to answer those questions if they ask you? If they're vetting you, if you've got this great new prospect, and you know, it can mean the difference for your business, and they start asking you those questions, do you understand what they're asking? Do you have the processes, the procedures, the technologies in place so that they are comfortable working with you and you get the opportunity to land this big contract?
Yeah, and that where a lot of the compliance stuff, and I'm sure Brad can, you know, understands this for sure, probably can speak on it, no problem. But with the compliance, that's where a lot of those questions are going to be laid out when you have to get a certification, or you have to apply for, even we had an episode about cyber insurance. You know, the cyber insurance guys are going to ask you certain questions to make sure that you are putting some kind of effort into place to protect your company. Those questions are great to then go around and hand off to people that you're working with, so you can make sure that, okay, this person, they look great, they have a great price is usually king, but we're going to have to spend a little extra money because this other guy, he's got all of his ducks in a row, security is sound, he understood all the questions that I asked him. You know, that's something that we, as business owners and people in a business environment really need to take a step to make sure it's put into place.
Yeah, and if you're talking in you mentioned HIPAA, if you were working with a company and have access to a company's data that has to be HIPAA compliant, part of their HIPAA compliancy is that you are HIPAA compliant as well. It's called a business associates agreement, where the associate, the person that you're working with, the other company, is also HIPAA compliant, and they understand that they have access to sensitive data and they have the cybersecurity protections in place to make sure that that sensitive data is protected.
Yes, indeed. So has anyone out there noticed maybe that they've stumbled upon some information that they probably shouldn't have access to? Or have they had any instances where maybe someone that they used to work with or one of the companies they work with has had issues like similar to what we've been talking about?
I'd be interested to hear from Todd. I know I'm kind of putting him on the spot, and he had some other things going on, so I don't know if he's available. But Todd is a financial whiz, and so he looks at the numbers. I would be interested to know if he has seen where this has happened to a company and what the financial impact to that company was. I don't know if he's there. He goes.
I'm listening. It's an interesting conversation. You know, I don't know of any like small business impacts that are that you can quote, you know, that are dollar values that are known, but certainly large companies that have been hit with these kind of things have incurred millions and millions of dollars in claims, as well as the reputational damage associated with it. You know, either from an insider hack or from a phishing scam or something like that. The one that you gave an example of, David, with Target, although that wasn't necessarily an insider who was taking advantage, it was, as you said, it was a contractor that wasn't that kind of opened the door. That was, you know, multi-million, $100 million damages to Target. You can see if you look at some of these public companies and you look on their SEC filings as well, you know, you can see where they're starting to list as a potential risks the cybersecurity stuff now, and they're as a risk, you know, when they publish their SEC filings. So it's not something that is taken for granted anymore, because they actually have to acknowledge it and take precautions associated with it as a public company.
Yeah, I talked to a state representative today, and it's on, of course, the state of Louisiana, but really every government out there, it's on their radar as well. And so I would expect most people to see in the next few years there be some legislative requirements around cybersecurity beyond what we see in the regulated industries already. I know in the state of Louisiana, they're talking about creating a registry of managed services providers, and you're going to have to register with the state. Now, you know, why are they doing that? Well, because they want to start keeping an eye on things going on. It's going to start with the registry, and then it's going to continue with, okay, well, now you have to get certified. Now you have to prove that you as an MSP are doing the right thing with security, and that's just going to grow. Like Todd mentioned, you know, we got Target, hundreds of millions of dollars. A lot of small businesses say, I ain't worried about that. I don't have hundreds of millions of dollars, so you know, that doesn't matter. But what we've seen, the trend in cybersecurity is it started with the big businesses and it's working its way down, just like every other technology. starts with the big guys. They perfect it, they work on it, and it works its way down to the small businesses, where now things like ransomware that used to only affect the big businesses, it's just slamming small businesses now. And we'll see the same thing with insider threats, both intentional and unintentional. It's going to continue to go down. Somebody's going to say, hey, I am now knowledgeable enough as an employee to go digging around in file shares and find the sensitive information, and I don't like you. I can make more money if I blackmail you than my paycheck. So you're going to see it more and more. It's going to go down smaller businesses. So.
And on that, sorry, go ahead, Todd.
David, you raised a good point with respect to a provider, because oftentimes as a small business, you may believe that you have your ducks in a row, but you are, in effect, you're trusting the provider to have all of those things in place, all of those precautions and provisions in place, because in essence, you're putting your trust in that particular provider. And if they have an employee that can go rogue, then you really want to know that provider has the precautions and necessary checks and balances in place, as well as you would if you did all that work in-house.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff. Harley, you had something?
Well, I was just going to say, on the topic of ransomware, we're seeing it evolve too, to where when it comes to trying to put a number on how bad this could affect you, it can actually be kind of simple, because what we're seeing is ransomware not only encrypts your data and then demands the ransom to decrypt it, but they're starting to release that information as well, or at least they threaten to, and they say, hey, you have 3 days to pay the ransom. Mm-hmm. Also, by the way, in addition to encrypting your data, we took a copy of it and we're going to start leaking it online if you don't pay. It's almost as an additional way to guarantee payment. And
right.
You can, as a business owner, you can just ask, how much is that data worth, right? Even if you have a backup and you can recover and you're still operational and you're back up and running, how much would you be willing to pay to not have your information for all of your employees, for all of your customers, maybe trade secrets for your company, to not have that information publicly available? You kind of have the responsibility on your shoulders to protect if nothing else, protect the people that work for you, right? And protect your employees.
Yeah, and I think that gets back to what Jim was saying, as a business leader, really keeping a pulse on the well-being of your staff, of your employees, because let's say you happen to have an employee that it could be a medical emergency, something with their family, and they desperately need the money, and an opportunity comes up, and if you as a business owner don't understand the situation that an employee is in, you may get blindsided by the fact that this normally good employee took advantage of you and is now making money on your information because they were desperate. So keeping a good pulse and having that conversation with your employees that we're doing some of these things to protect you, and we're going to ask you questions, and so great point there, Harlan.
Yeah, and I mean, on that point too, and there are active contract, there are active payouts on the dark web right now for information. So if you do have an employee on your staff and they go on, they're everybody's becoming more and more kind of tech savvy these days. So you have someone on your staff that they go on the dark web and they see, well, oh man, I could get, especially if it's like health information, I can get $150 a file on this. They start looking at all the numbers, adding everything up. And it's becoming more and more tempting because there's more and more access to those malicious areas. They have job postings in the dark web for, hey, we need a hacker who can do this, or we need someone who can give us this type of information, and you make $75,000 a year. maybe with benefits.
Yeah, you mean what you just mentioned, I don't want to give anybody ideas, but I've seen a lot of mixed stories about what happened out of the whole Twitter incident from a couple weeks ago, right? But one of the stories I've heard is a Twitter employee was social engineered, but I also heard another story where the Twitter employee needed money, right? They were in this financial circumstance, whatever was going on, and someone approached them and said, "I will buy your credentials to get access to that Twitter admin panel." So even if the employee themselves aren't going to be the ones going through that data and trying to sell it on the dark web, they might not know how to get on the dark web, right? They just need to know how to talk to someone who is willing to pay for that access.
Yeah, I know in the military, they'll watch your finances, and you become a security risk if you start having significant financial trouble, and because you're property of the U.S. government at that point, they can do a lot more than a private business can do looking into someone's finances. But that is a huge threat that it affects so many people, and it can be quite tempting for someone to make up the money that they need.
Yeah. Yeah, there's lots. I think we covered a lot today. Just trying to bring some awareness. I really think it's an important point to, about it's not always going to be intentional. It's not always going to be someone really trying to hurt your company. Like it said in the beginning, 75% of these are accidents. They don't know they're mishandling data. I think a lot of us think about that employee leaving and taking all the stuff with them, but there's much more to it. I hope we gave you all some good information about ways to prevent it and kind of some ways to spot it. And I think we're going to go ahead. It's getting close to 3 o'clock, so we're going to start wrapping things up. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. The discussion back and forth with all of you really helps drive the conversation and just helps us make sure that we cover everything that we should during these calls. And so for you to spend an hour of your time with us is just, we appreciate the support so much. Actually, David's going to go ahead and give the rundown of next week's chill episode topic.
Yeah, next week we have an important but not urgent chill with Jim. So there's a little Easter egg in that statement. We're talking about the Eisenhower matrix, and so it's a productivity method that you can use to help get more done. And if you want to know what I meant by an important but not urgent chill with Jim next week, be sure to tune in. It could help you get a whole lot more done in the week following. So
yes, also known as quadrants. I think that's another word for it. But yeah,
don't give too much.
That's just a hint to get a little teaser
right
out there. So, but yeah, we'd love for all of you to come. It's going to be the same chill time and the same chill network. We went ahead and posted that link in the chat, so feel free to sign up now. And as always, we appreciate having you. We look forward to seeing you next week on Chill with Jim.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Harley. Thanks, Brad, Todd, Jason. We appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
See you, Todd.